The invasion began with the deafening silence of space. No warning, no plea for surrender, just a sudden, unrelenting onslaught from the stars. The Zephyr, an ancient, near-mythical race of conquerors, had arrived at Earth's doorstep, their enormous fleet descending from the darkness. In a matter of hours, they tore through Earth's defense systems with terrifying precision. Earth's satellites blinked out one by one, communication networks went dead, and the skies above major cities flickered with the light of descending warships, too numerous to count. Captain Elara Vasquez stood on the command deck of Prometheus, her hands clenched on the console. She had watched as Earth's final line of defense had crumbled, like a brittle wall beneath an avalanche. There was no time to process the horror unfolding outside, only action. The Prometheus was humanity's last hope. The world's greatest warship, a marvel of technology, had been built in secret for this day. In a split second, it was all that stood between Earth's annihilation and its survival. Captain, enemy fleet in position, reported Lieutenant Kyla Daniels, her voice tight with tension. The sensors showed hundreds of Zephyr ships, their sleek and imposing silhouettes filling the skies over Earth's cities. They were already beginning their attack, laser beams lancing through the atmosphere, vaporizing entire blocks in seconds. No mercy, no warning, just destruction. Vasquez took a deep breath, pushing down the rising tide of dread. All hands, brace for impact. Prepare to engage the enemy. The crew of the Prometheus moved with practiced urgency, but even their remarkable training couldn't shield them from the shock of seeing Earth under siege. The Zephyr fleet was unlike anything humanity had encountered. Massive ships of gleaming dark metal, shaped like jagged black thorns, spewed torrents of fire from their broad weaponry. Their ships were massive, each one capable of eradicating a small country in a single strike. They were faster, stronger, and more advanced than anything human engineers could fathom. The initial battle was one-sided, Earth's ships falling back or exploding in fiery clouds, the few remaining warships scrambling to hold the line. "Captain, we have incoming," cried Ensign Liam Hale, his voice laced with fear. A massive alien destroyer loomed overhead, its weapons systems already charging. "Brace for impact," Vasquez barked, her voice sharp and commanding. The Prometheus shook as the first volley of Zephyr weapons hit its shields. The ship groaned under the assault, but the energy shields held, for now. Vasquez's mind raced as she quickly assessed the situation. The shields wouldn't last long. The Zephyr were too powerful, their weapons too advanced. If she didn't act quickly, the Prometheus wouldn't survive the next wave of fire. "Status report, Lieutenant Daniels," she demanded, her eyes scanning the chaotic data on the control panels. "We're holding steady, Captain," Daniels replied. "But if we don't retaliate soon, we'll be outgunned. We need to take down their flagship, or we're done for." Vasquez nodded. There was no other choice. The flagship was the heart of the invasion. If they could disable it, the rest of the fleet might collapse without its command structure. But taking it down would be a suicide mission. She glanced at her crew, every face tense with the weight of what was at stake. "Prepare the engines for a direct assault," Vasquez ordered, her voice unwavering. "We're going after that flagship." As Prometheus charged forward, weaving through the chaos of battle, Vasquez's eyes locked on the alien ship, a monstrous behemoth floating like a titan in the atmosphere. It was massive, more than double the size of any human vessel, but there was no time for fear. The crew went silent, their hearts pounding as Vasquez steered the ship toward the flagship, calculating their trajectory. The Zephyr flagship fired, But Prometheus was faster than they anticipated. With precision, Vasquez led them through the barrage of fire. The battle raged, but every second brought them closer to their target. "Lock onto their weak points," Vasquez commanded, her gaze fixed on the alien vessel. In a split second, Prometheus released a barrage of laser fire, punching through the flagship's defenses. The enemy ship groaned, its shields flickering as the weapons took their toll. For a brief moment, the Zephyr faltered, their massive warship seeming vulnerable. And then, a massive explosion erupted from the heart of the flagship. The explosion was a brilliant flare of light and destruction, followed by the violent decompression of the ship's inner hull. The Prometheus rocked violently from the blast's shockwave, sending the crew sprawling. "We did it! We've hit them!" Ensign Hale gasped, eyes wide with disbelief. But as the smoke cleared and the crew regained their footing, Vasquez knew that their victory was short-lived. The Zephyr weren't just here to conquer, they were here to destroy. The flagship had fallen, but it was only the beginning. The worst was yet to come. "Hold on, everyone," Vasquez muttered under her breath. "This is just the beginning of our fight." The Prometheus's engines roared as they surged into the heart of the enemy's fleet, and the captain knew that Earth's survival depended on their next move. Humanity's last ember had ignited. The Prometheus straight through the debris of the shattered Zephyr flagship, its engines roaring as it evaded the blast radius of the exploding ship. The crew braced for impact, but the ship held steady, barely. The shaking subsided, and the sound of alarms faded into a heavy silence, broken only by the crackle of the communication systems. "We've damaged the flagship," Lieutenant Kyla Daniels reported, her voice strained. "But they're retaliating. A second wave of ships is already on its way." Captain Vasquez stood at the helm, eyes narrowed in concentration. The Prometheus was a symbol of human ingenuity and resilience, but it was still just one ship facing an entire armada. The battle had only just begun, and the Zephyr were relentless. With their flagship destroyed, the aliens would need to regroup, but their overwhelming numbers still threatened to crush Earth's last line of defense. "Status on our fleet?" Vasquez asked. "We're alone, Captain," Daniels replied, glancing nervously at the empty void around them. "The rest of our forces have either been wiped out or are on the run. There's nothing left but us and a handful of scattered resistance cells." Vasquez's jaw tightened. The Prometheus was the last ship standing, but it couldn't carry Earth alone. They needed to turn the tide, now. "Set a course for Earth's surface," Vasquez ordered. "We need to regroup with ground forces. It's time to show the Zephyr what humanity can do when backed into a corner." On Earth, the situation was even bleaker. The cities, once bustling with life, now lay in ruins. The Zephyr had struck without mercy, reducing vast swathes of civilization to smouldering rubble. What remained of Earth's military was scattered, disorganized, and outgunned. Yet, in the heart of the chaos, a flicker of defiance burned in the hearts of humanity's fighters. General Anthony Hawke, a seasoned veteran and the leader of Earth's last standing ground forces, watched the skies darken as the Zephyr's fleet loomed above. He was not one for speeches, but now, with his planet on the brink of extinction, there was no time for hesitation. His radio crackled to life, the voice of Captain Vasquez cutting through the static. "General Hawke, this is Captain Vasquez of the Prometheus," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We're coming down to join the fight. We need your coordinates." "Roger that, Captain," Hawke replied. "We've been holding out in the Rockies, using the mountains to shield our forces. But we're losing ground fast. We need every weapon we can get our hands on. I'll be there within the hour, Vask said, her tone determined. Prepare to fight, General. We're not giving up on Earth. As the Prometheus descended through the stratosphere, a trail of fire marking its entry, Vasquez surveyed the ground through the ship's advanced optics. The devastation was unimaginable. Buildings reduced to dust, entire regions scorched. But what struck her most was the sight of the survivors. Resistance groups, scattered across the ruins, had formed makeshift encampments in the mountains and forests, holding their ground against the invaders. Their survival against such overwhelming odds was a testament to humanity's resilience. We'll need to link up with the ground forces, Vasquez said, turning to her crew. Get ready for extraction. We're going in hot. The Prometheus landed on a ridge overlooking a key resistance stronghold. General Hawke and his soldiers were waiting for them, their faces grim but resolute. The sight of the Prometheus, the symbol of humanity's defiance, was a beacon of hope for the battered survivors. We've got one shot at this, Captain, Hawke said, his voice low. If we don't hit back hard now, they'll finish us off. The Zephyr's main ground forces are moving in on our position. We need a distraction. Vasquez nodded, her mind already working. The Zephyr were a terrifying force, but humanity had something they didn't: resourcefulness. We'll strike at their supply lines, Vasquez said, already calculating the plan. If we cripple their logistics, we'll slow their advance. And we'll do it the human way, unpredictable, relentless, and brutal. She turned to her crew, issuing orders with the precision of a seasoned commander. Lieutenant Daniels, coordinate with Hawke's forces. We're going to use the mountains for cover. Engineer teams, prepare for sabotage. We'll hit them where it hurts. As the Prometheus's crew deployed alongside Earth's ground forces, the first wave of Zephyr soldiers arrived, massive armoured warriors marching across the scorched Earth. They were prepared for a fight, but they had no idea what awaited them. The humans didn't need the advanced technology of the Zephyr. They had something much more dangerous: the will to survive, the determination to fight for every inch of their home. As the battle unfolded, humanity's guerrilla tactics, hit and run, traps, and sabotage, began to take their toll. The Zephyr, for the first time since the invasion began to falter. The odds were still stacked against them, but the human spirit had found its voice, and it was louder than any alien force. The Prometheus and Earth's remaining forces pressed forward, a rising tide of defiance against an overwhelming enemy. The first real victory had been won, but the war was far from over, and humanity had just begun to show the Zephyr what they were capable of. The Phoenix had risen. The victory over the Zephyr's ground forces had sent a ripple of hope through Earth's beleaguered resistance. The Prometheus had struck a decisive blow, but the true cost of the battle became apparent the moment the dust settled. The Zephyr were not simply invaders. They were an ancient, calculating enemy, and this small victory would not be enough to turn the tide of the war. Captain Vasquez stood in the war room of the Prometheus, staring at the holographic display that filled the room. The alien fleet had withdrawn momentarily, regrouping at the edges of Earth's atmosphere. But that only meant one thing: they were preparing for a larger, more devastating strike. The Zephyr had underestimated humanity's tenacity, but now their true power was about to be unleashed. "Any word on the rest of our fleet?" Vasquez asked, her voice tight with tension. Lieutenant Daniels was at her console, her fingers moving rapidly across the controls. "No response, Captain. It's just us and the ground forces. We're on our own." Vasquez felt a heavy weight settle on her chest. The loss of the rest of the fleet wasn't just a strategic blow. It was a gut punch to their morale. Without reinforcements, they could only fight for so long. The resistance groups scattered across Earth's surface could only hold for so much time. "We need something bigger," Vask muttered to herself. "We need a plan, Captain," Daniel said, as if reading her mind. "The Zephyr have set up a forward base just outside the asteroid belt. It's their central supply depot, and we know that's where they're getting the majority of their reinforcements. If we hit that—" "It's a suicide mission," Vasquez interrupted. "That station is heavily defended, and even if we could infiltrate it, we'd be facing down an entire fleet once we make our move. We'd never get back out." "True," Daniels agreed, "but if we can disrupt their supply lines, even temporarily, we might be able to slow them down. It might give Earth's resistance the opening they need." Vasquez thought for a long moment, her mind racing. Disrupting the Zephyr's supply chains could indeed buy Earth's forces some time, but it came with a huge risk. And then it hit her. What if there was a way to do more than just slow them down? What if they could use the Zephyr's own technology against them? "I need a full scan of their base," Vasquez said, her voice sharper now with a newfound resolve. "I have an idea." Hours later, Vasquez stood before the massive holographic map of the Zephyr's forward base. Her crew gathered around her. The more they examined the facility, the more a terrifying realization began to form. The Zephyr's base was not just a supply depot. Beneath its surface, hidden in plain sight, was something far more dangerous, an ancient, dark technology that powered the entire Zephyr fleet. "We've seen this before," Vasquez said, her gaze narrowing. The energy readings emanating from the core of the base were unlike anything Earth's scientists had encountered. It was an energy source so potent that it could power entire worlds, and it was ancient, older than the Zephyr themselves. Lieutenant Daniel scanned her console. "It's some kind of quantum entanglement reactor. I've never seen anything like it." "The Zephyr didn't build this," Vasquez said, her voice grave. "They found it, just like we found the weapon beneath the ruins of the ancient city. This thing, it's not just a power source. It's the key to everything." Her heart raced. The reactor was something far worse than a mere weapon. It was a tool of domination, capable of altering the very fabric of space and time. It could be used to collapse entire star systems, to manipulate gravity itself. If the Zephyr had mastered it, they could reshape the galaxy in their image. "I don't think the Zephyr fully understand what they're dealing with," Vasquez continued. "If we destroy the reactor, we might be able to cripple their fleet, maybe even stop the war before it can escalate any further." "But, Captain, we don't know what kind of defenses are in place," Lieutenant Daniels warned. "This could be more dangerous than anything we faced so far." "I know," Vasquez said, a glimmer of determination in her eyes. "But we don't have a choice. If we don't stop them now, Earth won't be the last planet they wipe off the map." Vasquez turned to face her crew, all of them tense but resolute. "We'll need to get in and out without being detected. The reactor has to be destroyed, and the station's command center must be neutralized. We'll take down their communications and disable their fleet's coordination. It's the only chance we have." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of the mission hanging heavy in the air. Finally, General Hoke's voice crackled over the comms. "Captain," he said, his tone grim but firm, "we're ready to hit them on the ground. Just give the word." Vasquez's lips curled into a thin smile. "We're going to hit them where it hurts. Let's show them just how dangerous humanity can be when we're cornered." The Prometheus's engines roared to life as it shot into the blackness of space. Earth's last hope had become a weapon in the war, a weapon that would burn brighter than any of the stars they were fighting to protect. The mission was a dangerous gamble, but it was the only option left. And as they sailed into the unknown, Vasquez knew that the war was far from over. The Zephyr had only begun to show their true strength, but humanity's flame was just getting started. The Prometheus cut through the void of space, its sleek form barely visible against the backdrop of the distant stars. The crew was tense, each member focused on their task, knowing that the upcoming mission could be their last. Their target was a heavily fortified Zephyr base, situated within the shadow of an asteroid field just beyond the orbit of Mars. This station was the heart of the Zephyr's operations, and within its core lay the quantum entanglement reactor, an energy source that, if left intact, could turn the tide of the war in their favor. Captain Vasquez stood at the helm, her fingers lightly brushing the console as her eyes scanned the data coming in. The closer they got to the base, the more her instincts told her that something was wrong. The enemy fleet had been quiet. Too quiet. "Lieutenant Daniels, scan for enemy ships," Vasquez ordered, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "I don't like this silence." Daniels' hands flew over her controls, her brow furrowing as the scanner returned an unsettling report. "Captain, they're waiting for us." "Waiting?" Vasquez repeated, narrowing her eyes. "How do you know?" "There's a significant energy buildup near the station's defenses," Daniels replied. "They've set a trap. The moment we enter their detection zone, they'll lock us in." Vasquez felt her heart rate increase, but she forced herself to remain composed. They couldn't afford to back down now, not when Earth's survival depended on the mission's success. "General Hawk," Vasquez said, tapping into the secure channel. "We're entering the asteroid field. Prepare your forces for a ground assault. We'll need a distraction to draw their fire." "Understood, Captain," Hawk replied. "We're ready on the ground. Just give the word." Vasquez nodded to herself. It was a bold plan, one that would require perfect timing. The ground forces would create chaos on the surface, drawing the attention of the Zephyr long enough for the Prometheus to slip past their defenses. Once they had reached the reactor, it would be up to the crew to destroy it before the Zephyr could retaliate. The stakes couldn't be higher. As the Prometheus entered the asteroid field, the chaos began. The massive rocks, some as large as entire cities, loomed in the path of the ship like a deadly maze. Vasquez steered the ship with calculated precision, her fingers dancing over the controls as she navigated between the looming obstacles. Every movement had to be perfect. One mistake, and the Prometheus would be torn apart by the jagged edges of the asteroids. "Enemy ships incoming," Ensign Hale shouted, his voice crackling over the comms. "They're launching from behind the station. 3 frigates, multiple fighters." Vasquez's grip tightened. The Zephyr had anticipated their approach, and they were already launching an ambush. The Prometheus couldn't outrun them in this confined space, and with no backup from Earth's fleet, the odds were rapidly stacking against them. "Brace for impact," Vasquez commanded, her voice steely. She turned to Daniels. "Deploy countermeasures. We need to buy ourselves some time." Daniels immediately activated the ship's defensive systems, sending out bursts of electromagnetic pulses to confuse the enemy's targeting systems. The Prometheus's hull shook as the first rounds of enemy fire slammed into its shields, sending sparks and alarms blaring throughout the ship. "We're holding for now," Daniels reported, her eyes wide with tension. "Shields at 78%, but they're weakening fast. We can't take another hit like that." "Evasive maneuvers," Vasquez ordered. "Use the asteroids for cover." The ship veered sharply, cutting between two massive asteroids as enemy fire splintered against the rocky surfaces behind them. The Zephyr frigates fired relentlessly, but the Prometheus was agile, darting in and out of the asteroid field as Vasquez guided it with expert precision. "We're almost there," Daniels called out as the entrance to the station's docking bay came into view, a narrow opening nestled within the asteroid cluster. The Prometheus shot through the gap just as another barrage of fire struck the shields, causing them to flicker dangerously. But the ship was through, now hovering just above the Zephyr station's surface. They had made it past the first hurdle, but the real fight was about to begin. "General Hawk, we're in position," Vasquez said, taking a deep breath. "Activate the ground assault." Below, Earth's last ground forces launched their assault. General Hawk had led his troops through the rough terrain of the asteroid base, using the rocky surface to mask their approach. They were armed with advanced explosives and EMP devices designed to disrupt the Zephyr's ground-based defenses. The distraction worked, as the Zephyr scrambled to respond to the sudden ground invasion, sending their forces into disarray. Back aboard the Prometheus, Vasquez and her crew prepared for the next phase of the mission. They had a narrow window of time to infiltrate the station's core, disable its security systems, and destroy the reactor before the Zephyr could regroup. "Once we get inside, the station's defense systems will be up and running," Lieutenant Daniels warned. "We'll have maybe 15 minutes before they're back online." "We'll make it work," Vasquez said, determination burning in her eyes. "Let's move." As the team boarded their shuttle and descended toward the station's surface, Vasquez glanced back at the Prometheus, its sleek form now hovering amidst the chaos of battle. The odds had never been worse, but if humanity was to survive, this mission had to succeed. With the fate of the planet hanging in the balance, Captain Vasquez led her team into the heart of the enemy's stronghold. The final phase of the war had begun, and there was no turning back. The shuttle cut through the station's atmosphere like a sharp knife, gliding smoothly through the low gravity and the thick, artificial atmosphere that the Zephyr had constructed within their base. Through the reinforced windows, Captain Vasquez could see the vast expanse of the enemy station, a monolithic structure with sleek, alien architecture that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the sky. Despite the sudden invasion and the chaos unfolding on the surface, the station's interior remained eerily calm, as though it were expecting their arrival. "I'm trying," Daniels gritted out, sweat dripping from her brow. "These systems are encrypted with a level of security I've never seen before. It's going to take." Before she could finish, the door at the far end of the chamber exploded inward, and a flood of Zephyr soldiers stormed the room, their black armor gleaming in the artificial light. The human team was caught in the open. "Fall back." Vasquez yelled, pushing her team into cover as the Zephyr unleashed a barrage of fire. The mission had just turned into a race against time. They had to destroy the reactor before the Zephyr overwhelmed them. They had no choice now but to fight their way through. The fate of Earth depended on it. The reactor chamber erupted into chaos as Vasquez and her team found themselves pinned down by a hail of fire from the Zephyr soldiers. Their advanced armor made them nearly impervious to standard human weaponry, but that didn't stop the team from trying. Every blast that hit the Zephyr's reinforced suits sent sparks flying, but it was clear that their enemies were far more resilient. The human soldiers, however, were equally determined. "Sergeant Reed, take the left flank. Daniels, keep working on that terminal," Vasquez ordered, her voice a commanding force cutting through the chaos. "We can't afford to be distracted by these bastards." Reed, ever the soldier, didn't hesitate. He threw himself from behind cover, gunfire sparking off his armor, but his focus was unshakable as he sprinted toward the left side of the reactor chamber. He dove behind a pillar, returning fire with his heavy assault rifle. The Zephyr soldiers immediately redirected their attention, forcing them to spread their fire, but they were still too many. Vasquez ducked behind a raised platform, her own weapon aimed steady at the approaching enemy. The Zephyr soldiers moved with eerie precision, their armor gleaming like shadows as they coordinated their attacks. They were professionals, hunters who had faced countless battles across the stars. But humanity had something they didn't, the unyielding will to survive. Vasquez peeked out from cover, squeezing off a burst of fire that struck a Zephyr soldier in the chest, sending him crashing to the floor. Another Zephyr soldier fired back, grazing her side with a plasma blast. Pain flared through her, but she clenched her teeth, refusing to let it slow her. "Captain," Daniels shouted from across the room. "The defense system's almost down. Just a little more time." Vasquez turned to see Daniels, her face a picture of concentration as she worked furiously to disable the automated turrets. Sparks flew from the hacked terminal as the system sputtered and flickered. The turret's targeting systems blinked erratically, then shut down with a final, satisfying hiss. "We're clear," Daniels yelled. "Reed, move," Vasquez ordered, and within seconds, Sergeant Reed bolted toward the reactor's central core, where the base's most critical systems were controlled. The door was sealed, but not for long. The Zephyr soldiers, realizing the danger, closed in on their position. Vasquez, her pulse quickening, ordered the rest of her team to lay down covering fire while Reed approached the control panel at the heart of the chamber. The countdown clock on the reactor was ticking relentlessly, each second like a pounding drumbeat. "Come on, Reed," Vasquez muttered under her breath. Reed reached the console just as the first of the Zephyr soldiers began to charge forward. With a grunt, he slammed his fist against the panel, prying it open. The reactor's core was heavily secured, surrounded by a field of energy shields and complex locking mechanisms. But Reed had something the Zephyr didn't: desperation. "Daniels," Vasquez shouted. "Can you help him with the lock?" Daniels, her rifle raised to keep the advancing Zephyr at bay, nodded. "On it." She sprinted across the room, dodging plasma blasts, and arrived just as Reed was prying open a maintenance hatch. With a few quick commands, Daniels began working her own set of tools, attaching a hack module to the console. "Just a few seconds," Daniels muttered, fingers flying over the display. The Zephyr commander raised his hand, and his remaining soldiers began to fan out, flanking the team. A squadron of elite Zephyr soldiers emerged from the shadows, their weapons drawn, and their eyes focused solely on Vasquez and her crew. The odds were quickly turning against them. Vasquez wasn't ready to give up. Not now. Not after everything. She signaled to Lieutenant Daniels, who immediately reached for a small grenade-like device strapped to her belt. It was a last-ditch weapon, a temporary disruptor that could overload the Zephyr's neurocommunication network, causing confusion among their ranks for a brief but critical moment. Daniels tossed the device with precision, and the air was filled with a loud crackle as the disruptor activated. The Zephyr soldiers staggered, disoriented as their tactical communications were scrambled. For a few precious seconds, they were unable to coordinate their movements, giving Vasquez and her team just enough room to make a final push. "Go, go, go," Vasquez shouted, her voice cutting through the confusion as the team made a break for the reactor's exit. Reed, Daniels, and the rest of the team sprinted toward the exit tunnel as the countdown on the reactor's timer reached its final seconds. But the Zephyr commander was relentless. With a snarl, he charged toward Vasquez, his massive blade raised. In that moment, Vasquez's heart pounded in her chest. This was it. She could feel the weight of the entire mission bearing down on her. The Zephyr commander was only a few steps away, his weapon poised to strike. Without hesitation, Vasquez dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the commander's fatal blow. She rolled to her feet, rifle raised, and fired point blank. The shot struck the commander's side, sending him reeling. But he wasn't finished. His eyes blazed with wrath as he charged again, a beast unyielding. Then, in a flash of light and energy, the reactor exploded. The shockwave from the explosion blasted through the chamber, sending Vasquez and the others sprawling to the ground. The entire station seemed to shake beneath their feet, the walls cracking, the lights flickering. The Zephyr soldiers were thrown back by the force of the blast. Their momentum halted as the station began to crumble around them. Vasquez scrambled to her feet, her ears ringing from the deafening explosion. Her vision blurred, but she quickly focused on the mission. The reactor was destroyed. They had done it, but they weren't safe yet. "Move!" Vasquez screamed, her voice barely audible over the chaos. She led her team through the collapsing station, racing toward the exit tunnel, as the walls around them buckled and fell apart. The station was coming down, and the last thing they needed was to be trapped inside. They reached the shuttle bay just as the station began to implode. The Prometheus was waiting, the shuttle's engines roaring to life. As they boarded and lifted off, Vasquez glanced back one final time at the crumbling structure. The Zephyr base was collapsing in on itself, but they had succeeded. The war wasn't over, but humanity had struck a decisive blow. The fight for Earth was far from finished, but for the first time in years, Vasquez allowed herself to feel the tiniest spark of hope. "Earth has a chance," she whispered to herself. "We won't be so easily defeated." The Prometheus surged upward, the last remnants of the Zephyr base disappearing behind them in a fiery explosion that illuminated the void of space. Vasquez leaned back in her seat, eyes closed, as the roar of the shuttle's engines vibrated through her bones. The team was exhausted, physically drained, emotionally battered, but the weight of their success was enough to keep them moving. The mission was over, but the war was far from finished. "Damage report," Vasquez said, her voice still steady, though the tension from the battle hadn't fully left her. "Minor structural damage to the rear hull," Lieutenant Daniels replied, fingers flying over her console. "Nothing we can't repair in a few hours. Shields held up, and we're good on fuel. We should be clear of the debris field in about 5 minutes. Vasquez nodded, trying to focus on the task at hand. The mission was a success, but the Zephyr had made it clear they would stop at nothing to crush humanity. There were still countless battles to fight, countless lives to be lost. The war wasn't over, but humanity had just shown its enemies that it could hit back. Hard. "Do we have comms with Earth?" Vasquez asked. "Connection is established," Daniels confirmed. "Transmission going through now." A crackling voice came through the static, shaky at first, then steadying as the connection solidified. "This is Earth Command. Captain Vasquez, do you read me? Is the mission a success?" Vasquez's chest tightened at the familiar voice of General Hawk. She didn't hesitate. "The reactor is destroyed. The Zephyr base is down. We've dealt them a heavy blow, General, but it's not over yet." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a deep sigh of relief. "Understood. You've bought us time, Captain. But Earth is not safe yet. We have to prepare for the next phase. You've proven humanity's strength. Don't stop now." "Understood, General. We'll be ready," Vask said firmly. She cut the transmission, her mind already shifting to what came next. The fight wasn't over, and the Zephyr wouldn't let this defeat go unanswered. They would retaliate, and humanity needed to be ready. Every ship, every soldier, every resource would be critical. Everyone, get some rest, Vasquez said, looking around at her tired crew. You've earned it, but keep your gear ready. This war isn't won yet. The crew nodded, though they all knew the truth. There would be no real rest until Earth was safe, until the Zephyr were defeated. They were the last line of defense now, and they couldn't afford to stop fighting. As Vasquez sat back, her eyes scanning the stars outside the shuttle's windows, she felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. Hope. It was faint, fragile, but it was there. Humanity had survived the first wave of the Zephyr assault, and now they had struck back. They had proven they were capable of taking on a much larger, more advanced force and winning. That was something the Zephyr would not forget. The message had been sent. Earth was not a defeated species. Earth would fight. Earth would survive. Vasquez thought about the people back home, the families, the soldiers, the scientists working day and night to turn the tide. She thought of the people who had fought alongside her, who had given everything for this moment. They had just struck the first blow in a war that would define the future of humanity. They had shown the Zephyr what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge. As the Prometheus left the debris field and set a course back to Earth, Vasquez allowed herself a brief moment of peace. It wasn't the end, not by a long shot, but it was a beginning. The beginning of the fight for Earth's future. The beginning of humanity's true resistance. And that, more than anything, was the spark of hope they needed to fuel the rest of the war.